Language as the maker of reality. Language for insight, for knowledge, for wisdom. Language for healing, and language to create a new material reality. These are the topics that we are going to discuss in this tape series. And then, having understood the mechanics of how language creates material reality, we're going to make practical use of this knowledge through sacred verses and healing sounds. But first, let us understand how language is in fact the force of information and energy that creates something out of nothing. In order to do this, let us go over some basic principles. Our essential state as human beings is that we are unconditioned spirit. The spirit is who we really are. And the spirit is the most powerful creative aspect of our life. It is a real force. It is a force as real as time or gravity. It is equally abstract. It is equally incomprehensible. It is equally mysterious, but it is much more powerful. The most creative aspect of our life is the spirit, and spirit in simple terms is awareness. It is the level of the field of creation. It is the choice maker inside you and me. It is the thought generator. It is the potentiality for energy and information. It is creative potential. It is infinite flexibility. It is the infinite choice maker. It's very powerful because it has the potential to generate infinite combinations of space-time events that have never occurred before, that have never existed before. As this awareness, which is our essential state, interacts with its own self, it creates certain mental patterns. And thus, out of the spirit, emerges the mind. These mental patterns are our conditioned responses that we grow up with. Psychologists estimate that the verbal cues fed to us by our parents, by society, by advertising, by media, that create the initial mental patterns which restrict our choices, just the verbal cues fed to us by our parents and society that run inside our heads like muffled tape loops amount to 25,000 hours of pure conditioning. And thus the spirit becomes the mind, where choices become restricted, where we create the illusion of non-choice. And thus are born our attitudes, our beliefs, our behavioral patterns to situations, to people, to things, to circumstances. And these attitudes, these beliefs, these behavioral patterns then lead to all events in our life. And where does language fit in? The role of language is that it shapes our beliefs, our attitudes, and our behavioral responses. Even though consciousness or awareness is the maker of reality, the making of reality is through language. What is language? Language is the means through which consciousness, which is all possibilities, creates patterns of intelligence that are conceived and then constructed into matter. Language constitutes the building blocks of material physical reality. We think of language as a purely human trait, and that is because we experience it verbally. We experience it as linguistically structured, verbally elite. But at pre-verbal levels, language is information and energy, and all of nature is alive with language. Consciousness is the potentiality for information and energy, and therefore for language. Language itself is the impulse of energy and information. In human awareness, it is experienced as words and images. In other forms of life, it may not be so sophisticated in its expression. It may remain pre-verbal as sound and information, as vibration and energy. Our thoughts, which are likewise quantum space-time events, impulses of information and energy, are also sound and information, vibration and memory. The book of Genesis says, "And God said, let there be light." The word spoken by God was the word light. This word light, as well as the English word loud and the Greek word logos, have their primal origin in the root leg, which means sound and word. Countless words originate from this primordial sound. Lux, which in Latin means light. In English, the word light. Logos. Lichni in Greek for lamp. Lex in Latin for law. Language. Legein in Greek, to gather, to call, to talk, to read, to count. Even the word religion comes from the same root sound. The same word is likhot in Gothic, likutha amongst the Indians in Peru, lak in Melanesia, lang in Micronesia, langit amongst the Khmer of Cambodia, lucidus in Latin, which created the word lucid in English, which means clarity. Rasit in Sanskrit, Ra in ancient Egypt, La'atu in Assyria, Larangai in the Aboriginal language of Australia, Lagat in Cornish Celtic. All these words relate to the eye of truth, to light, to knowledge, lightning, heaven, sky, fire, knowledge. All primordial words having the same origin. The Bhagavad Gita is the collection of primordial sounds that is supposed to give us knowledge and clarity by the information and energy contained in the sounds themselves. Because the sounds contain meaning, the images and insights contained in the words themselves bring about a change in our physiology. Although the original language was Sanskrit, if we understand the principles of paleolinguistic anthropology, which is the principles of the science which goes to the origin of words and sounds, then we understand that the roots of all language are the same. Language acquires different nuances of expression depending on culture and geographical locale. The words of the Bhagavad Gita in any language will evoke the same images, the same insights, the same knowledge, and the same physiological effects. Language thus gives dimensionality to the dimensionless. The dimensionless is the unified field, the field of all possibilities, pure consciousness itself, the field of pure potentiality. Out of this field of pure potentiality, language creates material reality. The dimensionless gets born as dimensionality. Eternity gets created into space and time. Time is born of eternity. Let us look at some more examples of the common word, sound, image origin of all languages. As already stated, logos, light, loud, all have the same relationship. Light, logos, loud, beginning, the Big Bang of creation. Likewise, the ancient Norse goddesses of fate had names derived from the same root, Urt or Verthandi, the Gothic Werth, the Anglo-Saxon Werd, the Old Nordic Vard, all go back to the Sanskrit root Vrit, which means disturbance in consciousness. All these words mean to unroll, to become, to come into being. The Aramaic word Varda, the Arabic Vard, the Hebrew Werd means bud. that which comes into being, and the rose, that which has become. And so we see a resonance of what we find in the book of Genesis, in the Gospel of St. John, when he says, "And first there was the Word, and the Word was made into flesh." In Sanskrit, first there was vritti in Chetna, which is consciousness, and vritti was the word, it was the quantum fluctuation. And therefore, it becomes obvious that matter, information, and energy are born of language, which is the disturbance in the quantum field. What is becoming very clear now is that time too is similarly engendered in the self. Time is quantified eternity, born through conceptualization, the movement of thought. In other words, language. It is now known that in primeval man, time was first conceived and experienced in the biological periodicities of the human menstrual cycle. That was the actual primal meter or measuring device. The Greek word metra originally meant uterus. It was the only measure. Matter, metra, mater, which is mother, are all related to the same sounds. All words signifying measurement come from this word root. In Sanskrit, matra means to measure. Matri has anything to do with mother, which is the first measurement of existence. And then a whole conglomeration of words derived from the same origin: measurement, dimension, diameter, immense, parameter, thermometer, meter, matra, uterus. To be born from nothingness, to give rise to form, to cause to be born, to come from the dimensionless in the world of dimensions. In other words, to become material, all having the same origin. And so too, we can find examples when we look at other words. The words God, Ra, Allah, Brahma, Atma, Yahweh, Ram, Baal, Ahura, Ag, Mab, Nagwal, all have the same origin. Similarly, the words Deva, deity, divine, devil, diabolical, tenafel, the same origin. The words Zen, Chan, Dhyan, meditation have the same primordial origin. Sounds create communication. The words Akash, Kash, to shine, to appear, Shunyata, the void, all have the same origin. So it is going to be the thesis of these tapes that you're listening to, that language is the maker of reality. For the sake of convenience, I have divided language into verbal and pre-verbal language. And my thesis is that pre-verbal language exists in all of nature. It is sound and information, memory and vibration. That this whole universe is alive with language. And then as a late stage of the evolutionary development of the human nervous system, we have verbal language, which is just a more sophisticated form of the same sounds of information and energy that are pervasive in all of nature. But this verbal language has given rise to a whole new world, the world of technology, the world of human civilization, the world of culture, the world of religion, the world of spirituality. In fact, nothing that we take for granted in the world of civilization, jet planes, computers, fax machines, telephones, radio, television, would be possible had it not been for the development of linguistically structured thought. However, let us not lose sight of the fact that linguistically structured thought is not the only way of thinking. Nature thinks, and nature thinks through sound and vibration. Sounds create communication. Whales, for instance, can literally talk to one another over distances of hundreds of miles. Computer analysis of these exchanges has shown an information density of between 1 and 10 million bits per half an hour of whale song, which is the approximate amount of all the information contained in the Odyssey. Pythagoras said, a stone is frozen music, frozen sound. And there's a Zen saying, matter comes from the void, and the void creates through sound and vibration. The void is matter, and matter is the void. Words, therefore, are symbols that express thoughts, emotions, intentions. They are not just fleeting events enclosed in mental space. They are the expressions of awareness, the fundamental stuff of life. They are impulses of energy and information, space-time events that convert pure abstract potential into a solid thing. And as I said before, the Gospel of St. John states, first there was the Word, and the Word was made into flesh. And also in the New Testament, the Roman centurion, when he encounters Christ, says, Lord, I am not worthy that thou should come under my roof, but speak the word, and my soul shall be healed. In modern language, we can say that quantum events in consciousness transform themselves into neuropeptides in the brain as well as the body. The new paradigm tells us that awareness produces biochemistry. The flow of awareness translates into the flow of biological information. And the flow of biological information can be through words, and words can become the triggers for transformation in this field of biological information. Words can create our everyday reality, our life experiences, our health. Words can also determine our ability to fulfill our desires, because the ability to fulfill our desires is just a function of our beliefs, our assumptions, our expectations, and our self-image. These beliefs and assumptions and expectations and self-image, in turn, are a product of our own internal dialogue. The words we use, the words we hear, the words that silently permeate our consciousness in every moment of our lives are constantly creating the program, the drama of our existence. There is therefore incalculable power in words. Words send messages to the core of cellular life. Do not therefore be misled by the power of words. They may be ephemeral and abstract, wisps of memory and desire, but they can be the harbingers of death, destruction, and war. They can also bring peace, harmony, laughter, and knowledge. And they can also heal. The verbal messages we hear in our heads are just one version of the information being exchanged from cell to cell every second. Every word imprinted in your consciousness can give the unconscious new assumptions and beliefs to operate with. Every word can activate a messenger molecule in your brain, because wherever a thought goes, a molecule goes with it. The verses of the Bhagavad Gita will trigger mental impulses in your consciousness that will get transformed automatically into new biological information that will bring about healing in your physiology. Other words will bring about transformations in your awareness that will open you up to the full unfoldment of your potential into the field of all possibilities, making it possible for you to fulfill any desire you have. Your redefined sense of self will be received by every cell in your body and will create a new reality for you. In the Bhagavad Gita, all three aspects of the field of creation are represented as the forces of nature. The Pandavas are the forces of good, of knowledge, the forces of light, the forces of creation. Arjuna is their representative. The Kauravas are the forces of ignorance, of darkness, of destruction. Krishna represents the field that is transcendent to all these forces, and yet it is the potentiality of both. Krishna is the knowledge of the higher self, by knowing which all else can be known. In each of us, conflicts arise. These are the conflicts of choice that put us in a state of confusion in every moment of our existence. We are a conglomeration of forces that steer us in the direction of ignorance or knowledge, darkness or light, destruction and death on the one side, and longevity and immortality on the other. The only choice in such a situation is to take recourse to a higher level of authority, and that is what Krishna represents. Hearing the words of the Bhagavad Gita will create in the consciousness of the listener insights, knowings, intuitions, and physiological responses that will vary from individual to individual depending on their present state of evolution and consciousness. However, every time the listener listens, he or she will ascend another step or two in his or her evolution. The more one listens, the more one gains. The Bhagavad Gita is the kernel, the seed of the wisdom of the Vedas. It addresses every mystery and every question that man has ever encountered. These words give us power and knowledge, but they also give us peace, harmony, laughter, and love. They give us healing. As we go through the verses of the Gita, certain words may have connotations that we are not familiar with. For example, reference to the three worlds is reference to waking, dreaming, and sleep states of consciousness. Reference to the destruction of the evil forces is reference to the negative tendencies in all of us, which we all need to get rid of. When Krishna speaks of devotion, he is referring to that quality of attention to the self that gives us ultimate self-realization and complete self-referral, a state of mind from which all is possible. Gods and goddesses are symbolic expressions of our own states of consciousness, where we are able to tap into our own inner divinity and create anything we want. The demons spoken of are symbols of the anxiety that grips our soul, the fear that suffocates the heart, and the addictions that keep us imprisoned in the haunted alleys and torture chambers of our own minds. When Krishna speaks of the field and the knower of the field, he is addressing the three aspects of creation: the seer, the process of seeing, and the scenery, or the observer, the process of observation, and the observed, as all aspects of the self. The ultimate message of the Gita is that we are the makers of reality, that reality flows out from us like dreams from a dreamer from a bonfire. As we go through this text, other words will crop up, and we will see what they mean in the context of the total knowledge. But the main thing to understand is that the Gita gives us insights to the road to freedom. It lets us know that consciousness is the ultimate playground of the universe, that all is because you are, and that the playground can also sometimes be a beleaguered battlefield. But once we emerge through this battlefield victorious, we will find the path to freedom and liberation. It is also important to realize that one does not have to ponder over the meanings and insights contained in each verse or in each lesson. One allows these words to flow through one's consciousness, to get metabolized in one's physiology, and spontaneously the effect will occur. Having gone through the intellectual exercise of how sound creates physiology, let us now begin with sacred verses and healing sounds. Let us begin with chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga of Despondency of Arjuna. This chapter mirrors the conflict of choice we all find ourselves in every moment of our daily existence. What is right? What is wrong? What is the most evolutionary choice this moment, the right response to this situation now? The conflict, of course, is in the battlefield, the playground of consciousness itself, symbolized in this chapter by the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjay, assembled on the sacred field of Kurukshetra, eager to fight, what did my sons and those of Pandu do? Sanjay said, at that time Prince Duryodhana, having seen the army of Pandavas arrayed in battle, approached his Drona and spoke these words. Behold, Master, the mighty army of the sons of Pandu arrayed for battle by your talented pupil, son of Draupada. Here in this battle are heroes wielding mighty bows and as brave in battle as Bhima and Arjuna. And he said, O best of Brahmins, know them also who are the distinguished warriors on our side, the commanders of my army, whom I mentioned for your information. And he named all the warriors on the other side, and many other heroes equipped with various weapons and missiles, who have staked their lives for me, all skilled in warfare. This army of ours, though commanded by Bhishma, is insufficient, whereas that army of theirs, guarded by Bhima, is sufficiently equipped. Therefore, stationed in your respective positions on all fronts, do you all guard Bhishma from all sides. The valiant Bhishma, the aged grandshare of the Kauravas, roared like a lion and blew his conch to cheer him up. Then conches, kettle drums, tabors, drums and trumpets suddenly blared forth all at once, and the noise was tumultuous. Then, seated in a glorious chariot drawn by the white horses, Madhava, Sri Krishna and Pandava, Arjuna blew their celestial conches. Krishna blew his conch, and Arjuna his conch, and Bhima of terrible deeds blew his mighty conch also, and all the other warriors on each side blew their conches. The tumultuous sound resounding through earth and sky rent the hearts of Dhritarashtra's sons. And then Arjuna, looking at the sons of Dhritarashtra, stationed in their army positions ready to operate their weapons, raised his bow and said to Krishna, place my chariot between the two armies so I can carefully observe the warriors drawn up for battle, so that I can see whom I have to fight in this battle, which is going to now commence. I want to see those who are assembled, ready to fight, wishing to please in battle the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra. Thus, addressed by Arjuna, Krishna drew up the chariot between the two armies. And there Arjuna saw, stationed in both the armies, his uncles, grandfathers, teachers, maternal uncles, brothers, sons and grandsons. And seeing all those relations standing there, he was overcome by utmost compassion. He was possessed by extreme compassion and uttered these words in sadness. Arjuna said, O Krishna, seeing these kinsmen assembled here desirous to fight, my limbs give way and my mouth is parched. My body trembles and my hair stands on end. The bow slips from my hand, and my skin burns all over. My mind is reeling, as it were, and I am not able even to stand. And I see evil omens, O Krishna, nor do I see any good slaying my own relatives, my own kith and kin in battle. O Krishna, I covet not victory, nor kingdom, nor pleasures. Of what use will kingdom or luxuries, or even life be to us? Those for whose sake we desire kingdom, enjoyments and pleasure, they stand here in battle, renouncing their lives and riches. They are teachers, fathers, sons, also grandfathers, uncles and fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law and kinsmen. O Krishna, I do not wish to kill them, even though they may kill me, not even for the sovereignty of the three worlds, much less for this earth. O Krishna, what joy can we derive by slaying the sons of Dhritarashtra? Sin alone will accrue to us by killing these fellows. Therefore, O Krishna, it does not behoove us to kill our relations. For how can we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? Although these people, with their minds overpowered by greed, do not see the evil of destruction of one's family and crime and treachery to friends, why should we not see that sin is involved in the destruction of one's own family? Think of turning away from this crime. When ancient family traditions disappear, then destruction pervades the earth. When vice prevails, corruption comes, and corruption leads to ignorance. And then, by the misdeeds of those who destroy and create confusion, natural laws are violated. And alas, what a great mistake we are going to commit by slaying our own people for material gain. It would be better if I am slain unarmed and unresisting in the battle. Having spoken thus, Arjuna sank down in the back seat of the chariot, laying down his bow and arrow, overwhelmed by sorrow and a mind that was agitated. And so ends the first chapter, the yoga of desperation. It mirrors the conflict of choice that we all find ourselves in. The second chapter is the yoga of knowledge. It deals with the destruction of negative forces in our own consciousness. Sanjay said, to him, to Arjuna, who was overcome with pity, whose eyes were filled with tears and sorrow, and who was much depressed, Krishna spoke the following words. Krishna said, whence has this dejection come upon you at this critical hour? For it is unworthy of noble people, bringing neither heaven nor fame. Yield not to unmanliness, O Arjuna, for it does not become you. Shake off this petty faint-heartedness and arise. Arjuna said, how shall I strike Bhishma and Drona, who are worthy of worship, O Krishna, with arrows in battle? Better it is to live on alms in this world, to live in poverty, than to slay the noble teachers, for by doing so the enjoyments of riches and the fulfillment of desires will be blood-stained. Nor do we know which for us is better, whether we conquer them or they conquer us, the sons of Dhritarashtra, whom if we slay, we do not wish to live, are standing before us in this battle. My very being is overpowered by the sense of cowardice. My understanding is confused. I ask you, tell me for certain, which is better? I am your disciple. Please instruct me, who has sought refuge in you. For even on obtaining undisputed sovereignty and an affluent kingdom on this earth and lordship over the gods, I do not see any means that can drive away the grief which is drying up my senses. And Sanjaya said, having thus addressed Krishna, Arjuna said to Krishna, I will not fight, and became silent. Then Krishna, smiling as it were, spoke these words to Arjuna in the midst of the two armies. Krishna said, you grieve over those who should not be grieved for, and yet speak like the learned. Wise men do not grieve over the dead or the living. Just as the soul in this body passes through childhood, youth and old age, and so does it pass into another body, the steadfast one is not deluded. O Arjuna, O son of Kunti, the contacts of the senses and their objects, which give rise to the feelings of heat and cold, pleasure and pain, are transitory and fleeting. Therefore, Arjuna, endure them. O chief of men, the wise man to whom pain and pleasure are alike, and who is not tormented by these contacts, becomes fit for immortality. The unreal has no existence, and the real never ceases to be. The reality of both has thus been perceived by the seers of truth. Know that to be imperishable, by which all this is pervaded, for none can bring about the destruction of this indestructible substance. It is said that these bodies of the eternal embodied soul, which is indestructible and incomprehensible, comes to an end. Therefore fight, O Arjuna, he who thinks that this slays, and he who thinks that this is slain. Both of them fail to perceive the truth. This one neither slays nor is slain. He is never born, nor does he ever die. Or having once come into being, will he again cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, changeless and ancient. Even though the body is killed, he is never slain. O Arjuna, how will the man who knows this soul to be imperishable, eternal, unborn, undiminishing, slay anyone or cause anyone to slay? Just as a man takes off worn-out garments and puts on new ones, so the embodied soul casts off worn-out bodies and enters into new ones. Weapons cannot cleave him, nor fire burn him, water cannot wet him or drench him, nor wind cannot make him dry. The self is uncleavable, the self is incombustible, the self cannot be wetted, nor can the self be dried. The self is eternal, all-pervading, unchanging, and immovable. The self is everlasting. This soul is unmanifest, it is unthinkable, and it is spoken of as unchangeable. Therefore, knowing this as such, you should not grieve. O mighty-armed Arjuna, even if you regard this soul as constantly taking birth and constantly dying, you should not grieve like this. Death is certain of that which is born. Birth is certain of that which is dead. You should not therefore lament over the inevitable. Beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their middle, and unmanifest again in their end. O Arjuna, what is there in this for lamentation? One beholds the self as a marvel, another speaks of it as a marvel, another hears of it as a marvel, yet another, having heard, knows it not. O Arjuna, this soul residing in the bodies of all can never be slain. Therefore it does not behoove you to grieve for any being. Besides looking at your duty, you should not waver, for there exists no greater good than the path of dharma. If you do not follow the path of dharma, you will fall into ignorance. Having fallen into ignorance, you will fall from high esteem, and people will make light of you, thinking that you have desisted from the path of knowledge. And your enemies, disparaging your might, will speak many unbecoming words. What can be more distressing than this? Either slain in battle, you will attain knowledge, or getting victory, you will enjoy sovereignty of the earth. Therefore arise, O son of Kunti, arise, Arjuna, fight the battle against ignorant forces. Treating alike pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat, get ready for the fight. Then fighting thus, you will not incur ignorance and seek the path of knowledge. This is the wisdom of Samkhya, given to you, O Arjuna. Listen now to the wisdom of yoga, endowed with which you shall cast away the bondage of action. In this path of action, there is no loss of effort, nor is there fear of contrary result. Even a little practice of this discipline protects one from the great fear of birth and death. O Arjuna, in this blessed path, the intellect is resolute and one-pointed, whereas the intellect of the undecided, of the ignorant men, is scattered in many directions and endlessly diverse. The unwise, who take delight in flowery words, disputing the letter of the Vedas, contend that there is nothing else than this world. Obsessed with only material desires, they hold that the ultimate goal of birth and action is the attainment of heaven, and prescribe specific rites for the attainment of pleasure and power. Those who are attached to pleasure and power, and whose minds are carried away by such words, cannot attain determined intellect, which leads to one-pointedness and to the pursuit of the spirit. The Vedas enumerate the three gunas, which are the attributes of creation, the three qualities of creation. Arjuna, transcend these gunas and free yourself from dualities, the pairs of opposites. Be established in purity, unconcerned for acquisition and preservation, with your mind fully stable. One who has attained enlightenment has the same use for all the Vedas as one has for a small reservoir of water in a place flooded with water on all sides. Your right is to work only, to remain in the process, but to at the same time relinquish your attachment to the result. Let not the fruit of action be your object. Let not your attachment be to that. Established in yoga, established in union, perform your duty, abandoning attachment, being even-minded in success and failure. Even-mindedness and equanimity is called yoga. When you are attached to the fruits of action and crave for the fruits of action, you only experience agitation and misery. One who is endowed with equanimity sheds in his very life both good and evil. Therefore, devote yourself to yoga, for yoga is skill in action. For wise men endowed with equanimity renounce the fruits of action and so free themselves from the shackles of ignorance and attain the blissful supreme state. When your mind will cross the mire of delusion, you will then grow indifferent to what has been heard and what is yet to be heard about this world and the next. When your mind, confused by hearing conflicting statements, will remain steadfast and firm in meditation, firm in the Absolute, firm in the Spirit, you will then attain union with yourself. Arjuna said, Krishna, what is the mark of a God-realized soul, stable of mind and established in samadhi, in equanimity? How does the man of stable mind speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? And Krishna said, when a man renounces his attachment from all the cravings of the mind and is satisfied in the self by the self, then he is called stable of mind. He whose mind is not perturbed by adversity, who does not crave, who is free from fear and anger, who has constant wisdom, who is without affection or rejection everywhere, meeting with good and evil, neither rejoices nor recoils, his mind is stable. He who draws away the senses from the objects of sense on every side and transcends, his intelligence is firmly set. He who can see the scenery against the background of the seer, the field of change against the background of non-change, for him all things are possible. He who is attached to the results of action is unable to fulfill desire, and unfulfilled desires bring about anger. Anger creates delusion, and from delusion, confusion of memory. From confusion of memory, loss of discrimination, and from the loss of discrimination, ignorance and destruction. But a man of disciplined mind, though moving amongst the objects of the senses, is free from likes and dislikes and attains tranquility of mind. With the attainment of such tranquility of mind, all his sorrows come to an end, and the intellect of such a person of placid mind, soon withdrawing itself from all sides, firmly becomes established in the transcendent. When a man is devoid of this wisdom, he cannot have any peace, and for the unpeaceful, how can there be any happiness? As the wind carries away a barge upon the waters, even so the wandering senses take the mind into the field of ignorance. Therefore, O mighty armed, this knowledge is supreme, this knowledge which gives you recourse to the field of all possibilities, this knowledge of the self which creates all the objects of perception. Be established in this knowledge. When you have this knowledge, you will be awake even in sleep, and the ever-changing transient world will be seen against the background of eternity. You will carry the consciousness of eternity in the field of time. As the waters of different rivers enter the ocean, which though full on all sides remains undisturbed, you, in whom all desires merge themselves, will attain peace. And having attained peace, even at the hour of death, you will attain God realization.
Ni nadi tadarna taradani tadarda ta ta taradani tadarda ta nadi tadarna taradani tadarda taradani 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 ta ah